Do you remember the ritual after school? The click of a black and white set, sunlight thinning across the living room rug, a needle of guitar twang finding your feet before it found your ears? Do you remember the hush just before the music broke loose, and the way one girl's smile could lift the whole room? Do you remember seeing Pat Molittieri turn toward the camera as the band kicked in? There she was, the Southwest Philly kid with dark brown hair and quick, confident steps, skating the shine of Studio B's floor as if it were her own block on Passyunk Avenue. A skirt fanned with the beat, a partner's hand found and released, Lou Salino one afternoon, Billy Cook the next, while Dick Clark's voice threaded through cheers from teenagers pressed 3 deep along the rail. The camera loved her, but more than that, living rooms loved her. Across the country, hearts rose and fell with every turn. American Bandstand wasn't just a show. It was a daily rite of mid-century America, a new language written in steps and smiles. In those years when teenager became a force, Pat Molittieri felt like its emblem. Poised, bright, a regular who made the extraordinary seem effortless. She didn't sing, she didn't speak. She danced, and we understood. And yet, the paradox. A girl who lit up the nation's afternoons would vanish from the show almost as quickly as she arrived, and, years later, from life itself. How could a future so radiant dim so soon? Tonight, we follow Pat's whole arc, the neighborhood kid who raced into Studio B, the teen idol who broke a rule and paid the price, the young woman who chased California dreams and then chose family, and the wife and mother whose July of 1979 left a silence no record can fill. Stay with us. The music is about to start again. Patricia Pat Molittieri was born on January 22, 1943, and grew up in the close-knit neighborhoods of Southwest Philadelphia. Hers was a world of corner stores, parish churches, and row houses stacked neatly along Passyunk Avenue. America in those post-war years was in the midst of profound change. Prosperity lifted many families, yet beneath the surface a cultural revolution was stirring. Teenagers were no longer just children waiting to become adults. They were beginning to form their own identity, with their own music, fashion, and voice. Pat stood right at the center of that shift. As a child, Pat was remembered as lively and confident, the kind of girl who seemed happiest when music was playing. At John Bartram High School, she was not much different from thousands of other Philadelphia teens, studying, joking with friends, and rushing home in time to catch her favorite songs on the radio. What set her apart was a certain spark, a readiness to step onto the dance floor and make it her own. She loved rock and roll's pulse, practiced dance steps in her family's living room, and wore down more than one pair of shoes trying to perfect the latest moves. There are small details that linger in memory. A battered radio always tuned to WIBG, the local station blasting out new hits, the scuffed floor where Pat and her girlfriends tried the bop, the way she lit up whenever music replaced silence. Dancing was not just recreation for her, it was expression, freedom, a way of standing out without saying a word. Even before she entered the studio, she carried herself like someone meant to be seen. Her family played a central role in shaping her. Her parents worried, of course, about how much time she devoted to dancing and music, but they also recognized her talent and determination. Friends later recalled that her mother, Dell, kept a watchful but encouraging eye, and that Pat's siblings and neighbors became her first audience. That support, mixed with the vibrancy of her Philadelphia community, gave her the foundation she needed when opportunity finally knocked. For all its ordinariness, Pat's childhood had the seeds of something extraordinary. The girl who practiced spins in her bedroom mirror would soon whirl before millions on national television. One ordinary afternoon, her life intersected with a show that was about to redefine American youth culture. That familiar childhood, grounded in Southwest Philly, was about to collide with something far larger than even she could imagine, the irresistible world of American Bandstand. For a 14-year-old girl in Philadelphia, the pull of American Bandstand was irresistible. By 1957, the program had leapt from a local broadcast into a national phenomenon, and its new Studio B at WFIL-TV had become a magnet for teenagers eager to dance in front of the cameras. Pat Molittieri was one of them. What began as curiosity, what was happening inside that building where music thumped and laughter spilled out onto 46th and Market Streets, soon became destiny. The scene outside the studio was unforgettable. Long lines of teenagers wound down the block, their chatter punctuated by the latest songs blasting from transistor radios. Girls clutched purses decorated with buttons of their favorite singers. Boys combed their hair into gleaming pompadours. For many, it was simply a chance to get close to the music. For Pat, it was a chance to be part of something larger than life. Standing among that crowd, her dark hair framing a face lit with anticipation, she imagined what it would feel like to step through the doors and be chosen to dance. When her moment came, it was electric. The bright lights of Studio B seemed to erase the walls. The set glowed as if it were a stage built for her alone. Cameras wheeled into place. Dick Clark's voice welcomed a national audience, and the band queued up the latest rock and roll single. Pat's heart pounded, but her feet found the rhythm easily. Whether dancing the bop with Lou Salino or trying out new steps with Bill Ettinger, she moved with confidence far beyond her years. For viewers across America, those first appearances were revelatory. Here was a girl just like them, schoolbooks in her bag, chores waiting at home, yet transformed by music into someone radiant and unforgettable. The black and white images flickering on their living room sets carried her farther than she ever imagined possible. Within weeks, fan letters began to arrive, and local papers noted her name alongside the rising stars of the show. That first dance was more than just a teenage thrill. It marked the beginning of Pat Molittieri's ascent from Southwest Philly to the living rooms of millions, a journey that would make her one of the best-known faces on American Bandstand. Pat Molittieri's rise on American Bandstand was almost instantaneous. From the moment she appeared regularly in 1957, the camera found her with uncanny ease. She was petite at 5'3", her dark hair framing a smile that seemed to brighten the entire studio. One afternoon, she spun across the dance floor in a full-skirted dress, her steps sharp yet graceful, and the audience erupted. It was not just the teenagers crowded around the stage who cheered. It was living rooms across the country. Letters poured in, fan clubs sprouted, and suddenly Pat was not simply another dancer in the crowd. She was a face America remembered. Her style was uniquely her own. While other dancers played it safe, Pat added flourishes that felt spontaneous yet perfectly timed. She gave the bop her own twist, her skirts fanning out in rhythm, her eyes alive with mischief. She wasn't afraid to take risks, sometimes stepping just a little closer to her partner, sometimes breaking into laughter mid-step. The effect was magnetic. Viewers felt like they knew her, like the girl next door had somehow been transported into their television set. Her fashion choices, full skirts, fitted blouses, carefully coiffed hair, were mimicked by countless teens who wanted to look like Pat from Bandstand. Television magnified her presence. Every weekday afternoon, she danced into America's homes. Dick Clark understood the power of the regulars, and he made sure Pat had her share of camera time. When the camera swept across the floor, it lingered on her expressions, her confident steps, the little moments when she exchanged a glance with a partner or waved to the audience. For millions of viewers, Pat Molittieri embodied what it meant to be a teenager in 1950s America, spirited, stylish, and full of promise. The influence spread beyond the screen. Pat's popularity grew so quickly that she became a staple of teen magazines. Her name appeared alongside singers and actors, she was interviewed about fashion trends, and her photographs were passed around schoolyards. Fan clubs organized under the leadership of girls like Jane Smith, sending her notes of admiration and even gifts. She was invited to promotional events, and her picture showed up in national publications. For a teenager from Southwest Philadelphia, it was a dizzying ascent. One of the defining moments came in August 1957, just as Bandstand wrapped its first week on national television. Pat collapsed on set from sudden appendicitis and was rushed to the hospital. The incident only amplified her fame. Fans across the country worried, sending get-well messages and tuning in daily for updates on her recovery. When she returned to the floor weeks later, the ovation was thunderous. That scare cemented her place in the Bandstand story, not just as a dancer, but as someone fans felt protective of, almost like family. By 1958 and 1959, Pat Molittieri was one of the most recognizable faces on the show. Her dances with Lou Salino, Billy Cook, and others became highlights. She was photographed often, sometimes even featured in group spreads in magazines that described her as a teen queen. Every spin of her skirt, every laugh caught on camera added to her growing myth. At a time when youth culture was exploding, Elvis Presley on the radio, drive-in theaters full, rock and roll redefining identity, Pat stood as a vivid emblem of what it meant to be young and full of possibility. Her smile and her style made her unforgettable. And yet, behind the shimmer of television lights, there were rules and realities waiting to intrude, rules that would soon change the course of her life on Bandstand forever. If Pat Molittieri stood out on her own, she shone even brighter when paired with some of the show's most recognizable boys. Viewers tuned in day after day, not only to see the music performed live, but to watch couples glide across the floor in perfect step. Pat's partnerships became some of the most memorable. Whether she was twirling with Lou Salino, matching Bill Ettinger step for step, or teaming with Billy Cook or Frank Levins, she brought an energy that seemed to lift her partners as well. Later, she would also be seen with Bobby Burgess, another of the program's beloved dancers. Together, these duos helped define the visual rhythm of American Bandstand. The appeal was obvious to fans. They loved the chemistry between Pat and her partners, and many insisted that she danced with a natural ease that made every pairing feel effortless. Teen magazines published photos of her alongside her dance partners, describing them as the couples to watch. Some even printed advice columns based on questions fans asked Pat about style, dance steps, and relationships. In living rooms from coast to coast, teenagers whispered, "Did you see the way Pat danced with Lou today?" Or, "Billy and Pat looked incredible out there." She and her partners became teen idols in their own right. Behind the cameras, though, the life of a Bandstand regular was not as effortless as it looked. Dick Clark kept the rules strict. No drinking, no smoking, no behavior that might tarnish the image of the show. Dancers were expected to maintain a squeaky clean presence. For Pat, that meant balancing the demands of schoolwork at Bartram High with long afternoons at the studio, keeping her grades up while also handling sudden fame. Competition among dancers was fierce, each one hoping for those precious few seconds of camera time that might make them recognizable to millions. Pat managed to stay near the center of attention, but the pressure was real. There were lighter moments, too. Fans recall stories of small mishaps, like a partner missing a step, Pat catching herself mid-spin with a laugh, or Dick Clark teasing the dancers after a particularly lively routine. These small human touches only endeared her further to the audience. She was not just a polished figure on the screen, she was a real teenager with nerves, humor, and charm. Fan clubs cherished these glimpses of authenticity and sent even more letters, gifts, and photographs for her to autograph. At the height of her popularity, Pat's image circulated widely. Posters featured her radiant smile, and her columns in Teen magazine, written under Pat's party line, offered an inside look at fashion and life behind the bandstand curtain. This visibility set her apart. She was no longer just one of many, she was one of the faces of the show. Yet, that same visibility would soon place her in conflict with the very rules that had given her the spotlight. For now, though, her presence was a highlight of every broadcast. Fans adored the way she made even the simplest steps feel alive, and her partners seemed to glow beside her. In those years, Pat Molittieri embodied everything the program promised: youth, style, romance, and joy, packaged into 30 minutes of television that felt like a daily celebration. But beneath the lights and applause, a storm was gathering. The same qualities that made Pat a star, the charisma, the initiative, the ambition, were about to put her on a collision course with Dick Clark himself. The first signs of change were subtle. By 1959, Pat Molittieri had been one of the most visible bandstand regulars for 2 years. She was juggling long afternoons in Studio B, assignments from Bartram High, and the growing demands of fans who wrote to her daily. The balance was delicate, and the weight of constant expectation began to show. More than once, she confided to friends that keeping up the perfect image while still being a normal teenager was exhausting. Yet the real turning point came not from exhaustion, but from ambition, the desire to shape her own voice. Pat found that voice through writing. Teen magazines were booming, and one of the most popular teen magazine, founded by Charles Laffer, invited her to contribute. She began a column that offered behind-the-scenes glimpses of Bandstand, the dances in vogue, the fashions teens were copying, the excitement and drama of the show. To her, it was a natural extension of her role. She was sharing what she lived every day. But to Dick Clark, it was a direct violation of one of his most ironclad rules. Regulars could not profit even modestly from their bandstand fame. Their reward in his eyes was access to the show, a chance at the cameras, and the adoration that followed. Cashing in was forbidden. On June 24, 1959, Clark called Pat into his office after the broadcast. It had been a big week for him. He was preparing for his appearance on This Is Your Life and planning his first network television special. But he made time for this conversation. He asked her directly about the columns, about the money she was receiving, about whether she understood the rule. Pat, honest and unflinching, admitted she had taken the opportunity. For her, the writing was exciting, a way to build a future. For Clark, it was a line crossed. By the end of that conversation, Pat was told she would no longer be welcome on American Bandstand. Her reaction, captured in the October 1959 issue of Teen magazine, was both poignant and heartbreaking. The day I went to school instead of bandstand was the loneliest day of my life. For a girl who had built her teenage years around the show, who had poured her energy into every dance, the dismissal was devastating. Fans, when they learned of it, were stunned. How could one of the most beloved dancers simply vanish from the floor? Letters poured in, some criticizing Clark's strictness, others expressing sympathy and love for Pat. But the decision stood. For Pat, the departure was bittersweet. She was no longer bound by the studio's rules, but she had also lost the platform that had made her a household name. Some friends remembered her as saddened but also quietly relieved. The competition, the pressure, the constant spotlight, it was gone. In its place was uncertainty, but also possibility. California beckoned, as did the chance to keep writing, to model, even to dabble in acting. The bandstand chapter had closed, but her story was still being written. Her exit revealed the paradox at the heart of bandstand fame. The qualities that made her so appealing, drive, creativity, independence, were the same qualities that clashed with the rigid system keeping the show intact. Pat had lit up the floor, but she could not remain under someone else's rules forever. The lights of Studio B dimmed behind her, and ahead stretched a new, uncharted path. California dreams, new ventures, and eventually a very different kind of spotlight. Leaving American Bandstand might have seemed like the end of Pat Molittieri's story, but in truth, it was only the beginning of a new chapter. When she stepped away from Studio B in 1959, she was just 16 years old, with all of adulthood still ahead of her. Rather than mourn the loss of fame, she chose to explore the opportunities that her brief television stardom had opened. California was her first stop. Charles Laufer, the publisher of Teen magazine, had not only given her a column, but also a job. Pat moved west to Los Angeles, enrolled at Hollywood Professional School, and joined classmates who themselves were on the cusp of entertainment careers, Mouseketeer Cubby O'Brien, the Idrissi brothers, and others. She babysat Laufer's children, modeled for teen fashion spreads alongside fellow dancer Carol Scaldaferri, and even appeared in background shots of the film Where the Boys Are. For a girl from Southwest Philly, the palm trees, the neon of Hollywood Boulevard, and the hum of movie studios must have felt like another world. Her ambition extended to music. In a short-lived recording venture, she cut a single titled The USA, written by Paul Anka. Though it never charted, the 45 has since become a collector's item, a testament to the way her story brushed against the larger sweep of pop culture. She dated young stars, Mike Clifford, Don Idrissi, Tony Cosmo, even fellow dancer Bobby Burgess, each relationship reminding fans that Pat was part of the entertainment circle. Yet fame never fully satisfied her. As the 1960s progressed, she longed for something more stable. That stability came in 1963 when she met Victor Ranieri at a club in Drexel Hill. Victor did not know her as the girl from Bandstand. To him, she was simply Pat, vibrant and beautiful. Their romance was whirlwind, and by September 1965, they were married. With marriage came a conscious decision. She laid aside the glimmers of Hollywood ambition to embrace family life. Soon, daughters Delane and Dana were born, and Pat poured herself into motherhood. Friends remember her as a devoted wife and mother, present at every milestone, putting her children above all else. Life was not without hardship. In July 1979, At just 36, Pat collapsed at home from mitral valve prolapse, a congenital heart condition. The moment was seared into family memory. Her daughters at first thought she was joking until 9-year-old Delane pressed her mother's chest and realized her heart was still. She ran for help, and as paramedics carried Pat away, she whispered to her children, "You girls be good." Their reply, "Yes, Mom, we love you," were the last words they shared. Hours later, Victor called from the hospital with the news. "Your mom went to heaven and told me to tell you and Dana to be good girls." Victor never remarried. He raised Delane and Dana alone, embodying the phrase he often repeated, "Take one day at a time." Though the family endured heartbreak, Dana passed away from cancer in 2016. Pat's legacy endured in her children and grandchildren. Delane and her husband Colin Devlin remain active in the American Bandstand reunion community, often bringing their 3 sons and niece Kylie, Dana's daughter. In their presence, Pat's story continues to live. Pat Molittieri's post-bandstand life was not one of lingering celebrity, but of quiet devotion. She exchanged applause for family dinners, stage lights for the glow of her daughter's smiles. And in doing so, she revealed that the truest measure of her life was not the years she danced on television, but the love she left behind. Pat Molittieri's story is more than the arc of a teenage dancer who briefly caught the nation's eye. It is a reminder of how quickly fame can arrive and how quickly it can fade, leaving behind something far more enduring: memory. What set Pat apart was not only her graceful steps on the bandstand floor, but the way she embodied the optimism of a new generation. Her smile, her confidence, her willingness to take chances, all became part of the fabric of 1950s youth culture. Yet her greatest legacy was not in the applause of millions, but in the intimate circle of family she built. By choosing marriage and motherhood over the uncertainty of show business, Pat revealed what mattered most to her. Though her life ended tragically early in July 1979, the lessons of love, resilience, and devotion still echo through the voices of her children and grandchildren. Every reunion, every family photograph, every story retold keeps her presence alive. And so we ask you, the viewers, were you one of those teens sitting cross-legged on the carpet when Pat Molittieri danced across your television screen? Do you remember the swish of her skirt, the spark in her eyes, the way she seemed to light up the room? What memory of her remains with you still? If these recollections touched your heart, we invite you to stay with us here on American Bandstand Memories. Subscribe, share your stories, and help us keep alive the dancers, the music, and the moments that shaped a generation.